All right, so it's 3:31. I think we'll start it up. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rachel Kane. I am the owner of Sherlock Packaging, which is based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And today we are going to be talking on global perspectives for women leaders. That's a pretty hefty title, but I am not here by myself. So along with me are three very strong women who will help with this discussion. First, I have Layli Fadahi, and she is with Blunt Strategies. I have Shannon Click, who is with Bovita. And then lastly, Veronica Alfaro with Me Soda Essence. And I'll just let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank all of you for joining us today. I'm Layli Fadahi. I'm a partner and principal at Blunt Strategies. We are a women-owned and operated full-service strategic consultancy for Minnesota's cannabis industry. I believe the first and only one that's still full service. We're the team that helped lead the Grass Tops effort to get cannabis legalized, and now we really see our role as working with our local businesses and industry to continue shaping Minnesota's cannabis ecosystem to be one that is rooted in the principles of the community, including yourselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Click. I'm with Bovita. Our IP technology is actually based right here out of Minneapolis. We started 27 years ago in the cigar industry when we realized that cigars needed a solution to stay fresh. And through that, we had an understanding with some of our research that there was going to be a space for cannabinoid degradation and terpene degradation, and we created a product to keep cannabis flower fresh. And so for the last 17 years, we've been exploring the cannabis space, both on the traditional and the legalized market. We have partners and growers. You can find out a lot about our product if you scan our QR codes or just curious enough to go take a look. But our solution is right here out of Minnesota. So we're super excited to be able to be in our home state and see wonderful cannabis flower that's going to be grown and to be able to support efforts here in the great state of Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Veronica Alfaro, and I am the owner of Me Soda Essence, and we are a Latina-owned cannabis company here in the space. And we focus on Latino-inspired products and experiences and kind of bringing that to the market and learning to take up space there.
So again, I am Rachel Kane, and I'm owner of Sherlock Packaging. I started in 2016, and all I can say is it's great to actually have legalization here happen in my state. We help clients from the West Coast to the East Coast with everything from branding and packaging. So a little bit on my background, and I've seen things change in the cannabis industry space. It moves quickly. So Shannon, one of my first questions is more on that broad topic, especially since Bovita has been successful in expanding into 53 countries. How does a company even start to make that happen? It's hard enough, it seems like, for people just to get into one space alone. Talk to us a little bit about business considerations as you are expanding and growing.
That's a big question, right? When you think about getting into different countries as you're exploring what you're doing at a local level, it's basically more of the same. You need to be able to meet your customer where they're at. And if you decide that you're going to get into a new region, whether it be on an international scope or just even getting into retail or expanding your own businesses into different areas of the state, you need to duplicate those efforts, right? And so some of the things that we've noticed over the years is when you're meeting your client where they're at, with cannabis, there's a lot of uncertainty. People don't understand the rules, right? I see you guys head nodding. Yeah, so imagine that amongst every country, and now you have cultural appropriation that you need to take into consideration. You're going to want to understand the vibe of the street. We all know that cannabis is a movement. And so you learn a lot about your customer by seeing where they spend their time. And so when you start thinking about how you're going to expand your business and that's going to be your new customer, you have a responsibility to understand what's going on in their backyard. And cannabis is difficult to watch for the state of Minnesota, and duplicating that around 55 countries starts to have a unique tone to it. So the way we look at it is we identify the markets as when they're ready, and then we're also here as consultants for people as they explore before legalization is available. And a lot of our business has been done with growers for the last 17 years, 27 years, and they're in all different places. So just imagine, I think, what you're doing in your own business concepts and then just duplicating that. And there's difficulty in getting product places. But when you get a good plan and you have a great team behind you, you start to learn some things through scale too. So it can be difficult and scary, but it's also very rewarding to see the plant and how it's being nurtured in all different corners of the globe.
Sounds good. So Laylee, after Minnesota passed that low dosage, the beverage market just went crazy. And really on a national level, people are watching the beverage industry in Minnesota grow. Can you think of any other trends that Minnesota is also now starting kind of within that cannabis industry or movement?
Yeah, so it's been pretty exciting the last couple of months getting to go to some, conferences and things like that in other states, and then hearing people say, oh, like Minnesota is what the rest of the country is hoping to become when it grows up. And, I think that the legislation that Minnesota passed, both that low dose legalization law 2 years ago, and then the legalization law that we passed this year, are probably the most innovative step forward in cannabis policy since Colorado first legalized. Like, this is the biggest departure we've had, kind of reset and approach to the marketplace. So I think the most major trend I think that's going to come out of Minnesota is having a much more destigmatized retail marketplace. That's why everybody wants to be Minnesota when they grow up, is because our consumers are able to access cannabis products on the open market, much like they would purchase, alcohol, any other product. And that's going to ultimately carry over, I think, to the adult use marketplace as well. I mean, obviously, the manner in which those products and those shops are going to be age restricted and things like that, it's a little bit above, where we are with the low dose stuff. But in general, I think, the consumer taste in Minnesota is going to demand just a different retail experience. And I think the states that come after us, that's what it's going to look like as well. None of this like you're going into, the foyer and then they're checking your ID and then you're in like a holding room, like you're about to buy plutonium, right? They check your ID, you go in, you're able to interact with at least a pocket product packaging and have a variety of products to choose from. And I think ultimately, I mean, the part that makes me really excited when I think about it is that, like, when we finally get to that point where we do have, federal legalization, Minnesota is going to be ready to just like transition to an open marketplace in a way a lot of other places are going to have to go back and just fundamentally redesign how the market is integrated, how the industry is integrated into the broader marketplace. We've already got that, it's not just the cannabis industry, it's cannabis products, and they're in the liquor industry, they're in the brewing industry, they're in the wellness industry, they're sports even, so yeah, that's really exciting.
So I was going to continue with Veronica. So you just launched a new beverage drink. So in doing so and knowing that it's such a crowded market right now, what were your major steps or considerations in going forward in launching that?
Yes. So I think one of the biggest things is learning to diversify yourself, right? And one of those things was for us was to try to create a product that was Latino inspired, one, but also a flat drink, working towards a flat drink that really isn't on the market, and kind of scoping out different things that aren't there, and looking at that. But in launching it, again, one of our biggest things is really bringing experiences and diversifying our market that we are currently in. We want, a lot of the times the conversations become very black and white, and we want to make sure that we're leaving space for other people. So that's kind of a way we are doing that, is by creating products that inspire people through that. I'll just add one more thing. I think in my culture and being a Latina, sometimes it gets lost, right? And I want to make sure that we don't get lost in that, and that I think food and edibles and kind of experiences through that come through that. And that's one of the ways of making sure, as a brand too, representing that and showing that.
And back actually on that same point, Veronica, because you are Latina, and to you it's really important to educate your group. Can you talk a little bit about the stigma and how you're going about spreading that education, and maybe what you're hoping Minnesota legalization will lead to?
Yes. So I think there's two parts in that, because one is the education. It's very important to educate people in where they sit. The other portion is in the Latino community, it's stigmatized so much. So it's teaching people it's safe. It's safe now. We can consume, we can utilize this in different ways that are going to be beneficial to our health and to our well-being, especially because we like to drink. Okay, I'm Mexican and we like to drink, and I myself used to, and it's been one of those things that even in my family we've struggled with. But I will say, I'm so proud. This past summer at our last barbecue, I had no alcohol and I had only THC drinks. And my tias and tios were all drinking THC drinks. And let me tell you, it was such a beautiful sight. Beautiful, beautiful.
Was it a good party?
Yes, it was my brother's 40th. Yes. So yeah. So there's that, but then there's the other portion of it where the legalities sit with people who are undocumented, or that people that are working towards documentations and educating them that they currently cannot use, unfortunately, but they don't know that until they are told that. Yeah. And it's too late. Exactly. So it's making sure that people do know that. And so as we move also federally towards it, I think that also needs to be a conversation within there as well.
That's going to be hard.
Anyone else kind of on stigma or things that they face for educating?
Well, both of your considerations. One thing that you mentioned that I thought is really important for this room is that open market is very important, because right now every state is kind of looking at the state level. And when the constituents of Minnesota develop these brands and you have an open market to start shipping into different states, and you have that footprint and that blueprint, that's something that this work legally here in Minnesota has done for people coming in to protect, to give you the right kind of guidelines to have a successful brand. I think the consideration in Minnesota, I was in New York when the legalization announcement was launched, and we got a standing ovation. And there was a lot of people there from legalized states, and they just said, with Rochester Mayo and some of the food companies, and the retail companies here in Minnesota, we didn't expect anything less than some really good shots at rules and regulatory. It doesn't mean they're all going to be perfect. We're going to need to test these out, but those infrastructures that were built allow for these kind of things to exist and brands to get some dominance in certain pockets. So I'm excited about that for you.
Yeah, 100%. I've watched the market expand across the nation, and every state, there's always hiccups and surprises along the way. I have clients who are out in New York, and they've been paying rent for over 18 months and they're still waiting for that license and that green light, but they're required to. So like no system is perfect. And I think in Minnesota, we'll have to keep tabs, especially as it goes forward, and make sure that our industry is really being heard and followed because, some of the decisions first time around were a little bit surprising and left a lot of us shaking our heads and scratching and saying, are they listening to us? So kind of in that point, how do we keep going forward and making sure that the industry is going to be what is best for Minnesota, not necessarily what's best for big business?
I mean, so we have now had in pretty quick succession at least two very high profile things happen that left the local industry and advocates kind of scratching their heads. But both of those issues were resolved to our liking in under 24 hours. And that happened because, the legislators that worked to get this law passed, the governor, they are aligned with these principles for the marketplace that we've set up, that we want a strong local craft economy. They're aware of the fact that the work that led to legalization was done by local industry members, that this policy, the way it was drafted, it was because of hundreds of hours of time that local advocates, stakeholders, industry members put into helping to craft the policy. And that's why the second they started hearing that people in the local industry are like, what's going on? The issue was resolved, and it was to say, no, we're listening, we're going to adjust course. So now we're hoping that they just, instead of having to listen to our reaction and fix stuff, they just maybe listen to us from the beginning and get it right the first time. But I'm not panicking in the least over these last couple of incidents. I'm hoping the fact that it has happened twice now, though, has left the impression on the decision makers to please just start engaging the local industry, the local stakeholders, the local advocates, the local experts before you make the decision the first time.
So I guess one question I have for you as kind of a higher up business leader, building community among your team members, how do you go about that? It's really hard, especially for a lot of people in the cannabis space, because when we start out, we're by ourselves. And then before you know it, you have to be adding on a team. So maybe could you give us a couple tips or ideas on how to work with a team and make sure that it's successful?
I'll try. Well, first, I think you hire well. And you all know how to hire the people around you. And if it's sometimes in the beginning, it's your close friends and family, and that's the right decision. And then there's also times through your business entrepreneurship that you're going to need to grow and have new resources. So building a plan is important, and to dream big, of what you want at that level. But when we get into a work level, I would say, based off the conversation today, you need to fill your funnel with people who have a level of optimism in this uncertain market, because everything is up for interpretation right now, you guys. I mean, we all know that. You can read something one day and have a good feeling. You can read something the next day and feel like everything's going downward. So you want to have those optimistic people, and then people who can adapt to change. I've been fortunate to work with people on my team, some are sitting in this room today, who just knew that we have to pivot, and you have to pivot pretty quickly, especially when you don't have the certainty of a federal legalization ruling behind you. You're kind of taking it into your own gut intuition, interpretations of rules and decision making. And when you're sitting in a business and you have to do that, it's scary, because you're wishing there was a doctrine to maybe go to say, these rules fit for everything all the time. That's not here now. So we all kind of need to do the best we can to stay educated. I think this is my opinion, not even Bovida's. I want to make sure. But, you know, is to stay as educated as we can and to keep having conversations of what's working and what's not. And for Bovida, we're an ancillary brand. So we've been in conversations with people who haven't had the opportunity to let their guard down because they were usually doing something they were either hoping to not get caught from doing, or they'd been penalized either from the law or just personally from people. So we know there's a trust level. It's going to take a little more time. You don't just get to jump into business conversations in cannabis. You need to kind of have a space where you leave room for people to tell you what they're working through. So when you're thinking of hiring people, we look at it as people who can approach our customers with that kind of guidance, and really consultants, because everyone's journey of what they're doing, we stick around with dried flower. So not a lot of beverage conversations in our world, but beverage conversations are a part of our world because we're a part of cannabis. So, you know, just really finding those people. And then for the last one, I wrote a little cheat sheet, but just to be curious, passionate and curious, because you need a little bit of good news and some just luck in some cases just to make things happen in this type of a market. It's kind of like what .com probably felt like. They were having these type of conversations, like what's going to happen. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with cannabis, and that's exciting, I think.
And it's been brought up a couple times, but you know, federal legalization, we're still waiting for it. I first went out and lobbied in 2017 with the National Cannabis Industry Association. And it's one of those things where everyone's like, why is it taking so long? It's like any movement. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of people, time and effort, who just need people to understand how important that really is for our industry. So kind of to that thought, Veronica, if it, and when it does, I'm not going to say if, when it does become federal legal, what does that mean for your family and your brand and your business?
So I think that would open up the doors to a lot, especially in the Midwest, because in the Midwest, we don't have lots of generations of Latinos. We have first generations, we have immigrants. We don't have tons like in Arizona or Texas, California, right? It's so different. So I think that would open it up in a different way to be able to educate people and show them how to take care of their body and really allow them to also use their own remedies. And it's for them that they already know, right? It just opens up the door to them, I think, too. So allowing people to kind of create that self-care for themselves.
Yes.
I kind of think we're farther away from it now than we were, you know, and I see that because when you're looking at the large companies that used to put money into lobbying for federal legalization, they figured out that their money is better spent just going state to state and pushing for legalization. And I think for a segment of them, like federal rescheduling and being able to like put stuff into a drug pathway at FDA gets them the kind of financial returns that they want, that, you know, pushing for full legalization at a federal level. I also think, I mean, like politically it's challenging, but beyond that, I don't really like, I'm worried. I mean, the folks aren't really, the political case for it is we're farther away. I don't know.
I mean, we're tracking 280E. You know, if we can do anything right now, it's to give an open, free way for people to understand what's permissible in other business entities to have a successful business, and to support that part of legalize is what allows good business practices to take place. And we've seen this in other states where people have security, armed security, because they're carrying with cash. We've had instances where people have asked us to pay for cash, pay in cash. Now we have sales executives or people on the road carrying cash, which is not a good, it's not good for anyone. It always leads to headlines that are poor too, because it just sets us up for failure. So I think the way that we look at it as Bovida is, you know, agree with you on the federal legalization, unfortunately, And yet just looking at some of these things to give people a better roadmap to have a successful business, right? And make sure that they can take into consideration those other tax available resources that are there for all businesses.
No, definitely, without a doubt, and at least with Minnesota legalization, we have a little bit more insurance. Last year, when I returned from MJ BizCon, I found out that my company banking account was closed. I'll never know why, but they went as far as going down and closing my children's savings accounts. The only thing they did not pull back was our mortgage. So I feel a little bit more secure today, but let me tell you, as someone who doesn't actually touch the plant, who's in the ancillary side, who's had that happen, one of the very first things I always advise people is never have your personal and business at the same bank, number one, because that was something that was not fun to unwind. But it is really frustrating because on the federal level, there would be so many positive things that would happen that would really help the cannabis industry as a whole. Because we're here, we've been educating, we've been growing, and that's without that federal approval. But with that will also come a huge Wild West with trademarking and all sorts of other crazy things. So does anyone else have anything they want to add? Any questions at all from the audience after today's discussion on anything at all? Yeah.
Actually, I had a question right where we left off with federal. Considering the Midwest, cities like Detroit and Chicago, do we anticipate Minnesota is really paying attention to those cities when it comes to exactly what you're talking about, with having potential drivers out with a lot of cash?
Yeah, I think everybody just takes into consideration whatever business ethics you have to do cash drops, similar to like bar and restaurant businesses carrying and closing shop, just taking into consideration of security. But Minnesota has done a fantastic job from my lens, which is as an ancillary, not looking at everything, to take the safety of the consumer into consideration and the safety of the people who are building these brands. I mean, there were certain things that were done to really take that into consideration based off good business principles, which is a Midwest type of thing to do, if we can call ownership to that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think, no, I agree with that. I'm trying to think, responding directly to your question about like in Minnesota, are we going to be functioning under that same kind of cash-based system? And I mean, by and large, banking in Minnesota hasn't been a huge issue because we have a lot of banks that are very interested in taking the deposits. So, but when you have these issues like with MasterCard and things like that affect everyone everywhere, I mean, they affect people here as well. They will. Hopefully by the time, we have adult use dispensaries opening, which like there is going to be lag time, that climate will improve.
And that's like HR platforms too. You have to think about everything. Your Instagram getting shut down, your HR platforms getting shut down. Again, we've been a business in 27 years. We were on an HR platform policy, rolled it out a year later. They dialed it back because of our attachment to cannabis. And we're an IP solution that keeps cannabis fresh. So if that's happening to us, it's going to happen at all levels of, you just have to see where you have liabilities in that and protection. And I think you gave some really good considerations here. And I'm sure that with the amount of people who have been through this, there's a lot of people you can talk to hear and share stories about ways to protect yourself in that environment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I just started up, I was receiving FedEx overnight envelopes of cash from clients in California. That's how it worked. That's the only way they could pay for their packaging, and that was on them choosing to do it. But I still had to go back to my lawyers and say, hey, this is how it's coming in. how do I best handle it? And, you know, they did a background check. They said everything looks legit. But it's still always a chance. And that was on them sending me the cash, right? You know? So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to do what's best for your business.
I had two quick questions. Number one was for you, and you were talking about people who are not legal or like immigrants and stuff. When you said that they can't use cannabis, so they can't even use legal cannabis?
Federally, because they are sitting on like immigration status.
Oh,
So it would really harm. They should just report it.
right.
They would lose all of that, what they had been working on for years. So it's really educating them that they can. It's showing them. Yeah.
That is something I didn't even think about. So I really appreciate you sharing that information just so I can share it. And the other question I had was like for you when your bank account got shut down, was that like federal officials coming after your bank account, or was that like
I'll never know.
You
They
don't
have to
even-
tell
oh, they
you.
don't.
They don't legally ever have to tell you why your account is being closed.
so your bank just closed it and said like we were told to close your accounts?
We probably went to about 6 local branches in the Twin Cities trying to get some kind of answer.
Wow.
Up to just like, tell us, please.
Well, these are just good things to know. Thanks, ladies. Thanks for sharing all the information.
And one other thing too to note is like, you know, with St. Paul trying to spread the ordinance of no smoking, that again is like a really low swing to a lot of people in our community who economically don't have a choice except for to smoke at home then. And then they're putting their rent or rentals at risk. There's so many reasons why when we see programs like that the cities are trying to roll out, talking about economically, how that's really going to affect our society as a whole, because again, that's just meaning those bottom people, they'll be the ones who get the most affected. And that's what we are trying to change. We don't need that anymore. We need to provide safe spaces for every single citizen. Any other questions? All right. Well, you guys have been a great audience. So thank you so much.